Hello guys, so we are now at BTC Prague and here with you Anna Tutova, co-founder of Coins Telegram, and our guest Adam Beck. He's already for the second time on our channel, and he is a Bitcoin pioneer. He was actually mentioned in Satoshi Nakamoto white paper, and he is inventor of Hashcash, the system which uses proof of work for the prevention of spam. And as you know, Bitcoin is based on proof of work. And as well, Adam is founder of Blockstream, one of the first Bitcoin infrastructure companies. So great to have you here again, Adam. And for those who don't know yet who you are, can you tell more about your background? And you obviously discovered Bitcoin just via email from Satoshi. So can you tell us about your first impression about Bitcoin?
Yeah, I was interested in previous electronic cash systems like DigiCash, and there were some people who tried to work out how to make a decentralized electronic cash system using proof of work, like Nick Szabo, Wei Dai, Hal Finney, myself, in like 97, 98. And so Satoshi sent an email in August 2008, and it seemed like my impression was that he had solved some of the unresolved problems in the previous designs, like B-Money and BitGold. So, my initial impression was that it's interesting he solved them. Later, I read some summaries by Hal Finney, and it struck me that Bitcoin wasn't as private as DigiCash, for example, but nevertheless, it was decentralized, which was important because DigiCash was centralized, and we thought, people who are interested in it thought it had failed because it was centralized.
And can you imagine back at the time that Bitcoin will become as big as it is now?
Well, I mean, that was certainly one of the questions in my mind, which is, Satoshi, in the way Hal Finney was describing that it works with Bitcoin, had solved some of the technical problems, but it was still a big question of whether it would take off. It would bootstrap, it would get lots of users, because, in the beginning, there were no users really, just people playing with it or trying it. And there were also no ways to trade it, like to buy it or sell it. The only option was to mine it on a laptop or a CPU.
And in what do you see the benefits of decentralization? Why decentralization is so important?
Sorry, I think you have to say that again because I didn't hear you.
In what do you see the benefits of decentralization and why decentralization is important in Bitcoin?
Right, so I think decentralization is important in Bitcoin, and it's actually the example of DigiCash and the thinking about how to make an electronic cash system before Bitcoin. It was informed by and a reaction to seeing a centralized system that people were excited about and was promising, seeing it fail. And the reason that people understood it to have failed was because it was centralized. So I think one of the reasons you want it to be decentralized is so it's survivable, so that if individuals leave the network or companies go out of business, that the network continues. So that's the kind of survivability. And then the other thing is with DigiCash, it was using blind signatures. So you get cryptographic fungibility, which just means that it's very private. So you can't selectively censor anything because you can't see it. Now with Bitcoin, because it doesn't have as much privacy, there's a potential for miners to try to censor transactions. And so the way Bitcoin achieves sort of finality and censorship resistance is via decentralization of mining. And so I think, the combination of many people verifying Bitcoin transactions with full nodes and there being multiple miners who could mine a transaction. So if one miner didn't mine a transaction, then another one would. So I think, Bitcoin is relying on decentralization for those two properties, survivability and censorship resistance.
As well, we now talk about Bitcoin as a hedge against inflation, and it may become another like reserve currency maybe in the future. Do you think it's possible? And what's going to be with the dollar? Do you think the dollar may collapse in the future? We see the continued inflation in the gas. So we see other countries now stop trading in dollar, like recently Saudi Arabia stopped contracts with $100. So what do you think of that?
Yeah, I mean, I think in the short term, Bitcoin is like an asset class, an investment. So it can coexist with the dollar in the same way that some people have gold or gold ETFs in their savings. But in the longer term, some people are more ambitious and think it could see like Bitcoin could start a return to the gold standard, but a return back to digital gold this time. And that's effectively the topic of Safedin Amu's book, right? The Bitcoin standard, by which he means that the world goes back to a gold standard-like system, but based on Bitcoin instead of physical gold.
And now we as well see how industry matured a lot. We see a lot of institutions getting into it too. Finally see the Bitcoin spot ETF and the silver spot ETF. So what are your thoughts on the impact of approval of Bitcoin spot ETF for the industry?
Yeah, I mean, for us, people who are interested in Bitcoin have been using it and using exchanges to buy Bitcoin or other ways in the Bitcoin applications to buy Bitcoin. Then it doesn't seem like that important to us that there's a Bitcoin ETF. But what you have to bear in mind is that the Bitcoin ETF is an accessibility improvement. So it enables people who find the kind of very technology heavy thing too complicated or they don't understand it. So an ETF gives them access to it. And for some people, they might view the approval of an ETF as a reason to trust Bitcoin because maybe they already trust their savings and investments to financial institutions. So for some people who have been in Bitcoin for longer, they might distrust those institutions. But for other people, they trust them. So
And how do you see the current state of institutional investment in crypto and also to have as well as institutional investors in blockchain?
well, I think that there isn't that much institutional investment yet in the sense that I think that most of the people who bought the Bitcoin ETFs are individual investors talking with their financial advisor or their broker. There are some hedge funds using it for arbitrage, of course, but the actual institutional investment where managed funds like pension funds and mutual funds would allocate to Bitcoin. There have been a few cases of that happening already, but not very much. So I think that's still to follow in the next 6 months or a couple of years. So I think it's still early days for the full implication for allocation to Bitcoin to be seen in the market.
And Bitcoin initially was created as an instrument to give people access to everybody, to their previous finances. But currently we see as well how things is institutionalized and how person giving players and asset managers like BlackRock, etc. are getting into it. So do you see that they may manipulate the market, control the market?
Well, I mean, I think it's important that the ability to custody yourself, like to have your own keys, to make your own transactions, I think that's important because ultimately the value of Bitcoin is derived from that. The ability of individuals to hold their keys so they can't have their assets frozen, they can't be censored, and it's very permissionless. So that permissionless network is able to have faster innovation, whereas Bitcoin inside an ETF is in the old technology sphere, right? So it's hard to innovate inside ETFs, but it's much easier for people to build innovation on the actual network, as well as delivering extra value to people who need it, right? That you have the uncensorability and unfreezability, which is lacking in the ETFs. So I think while it allows different people to participate, it's important that there should not too much goes into the ETFs. Now, I'm sure Bitcoin as an asset class could succeed with most of it in the ETF, but then it would really be just an investment and not a network, and not provide, self-sovereignty and freedom and these kind of extra capabilities to individuals. So I think it's okay for both to evolve at the same time, but you don't want too much of the ETFs.
And what are your thoughts on Ethereum? We see as well now legitimization of Ethereum too, and then Ethereum Ethereum.
No, I mean, I think that the ETF providers are just looking to make money from, tokenizing and like wrapping things in ETFs basically. And so I think really that Bitcoin is the only investable asset class in the crypto asset space, and the rest are, more like speculation, in my opinion.
And with now, with Liquid, you're one of the first developers of the side chain on the Bitcoin, so give Bitcoin utility. And currently, we see finally the time of Bitcoin L2s coming here. It's already probably over 70 companies developing layer 2. So, what's the future for Bitcoin L2s? Do you see will be eventually the winner?
Yeah, I mean, I think that what has been happening over the last years is when the Bitcoin fees are high, like usually in a bull market or recently with the inscriptions, then exchanges and wallets and merchants start adopting layer twos or improving the efficiency of the way they handle transactions. So, you know, as we're at the beginning of a new cycle, I think there's a possibility there'll be high fees over the next, 6 months or a year. So we'll probably see some more adoption. And it's also necessary, really, to scale Bitcoin to enable more people to use it for more use cases.
And what do you see as well about DeFi on Bitcoin? Whether it has potential on Bitcoin?
Well, I think that there are some high risk, there are different things people mean by DeFi. And a lot of the DeFi in the last couple of years, like in the bear market, actually, failed or lost people money or had very high leverage in it, which caused deleveraging events. So I think that kind of DeFi is kind of extremely speculative and risky, both, from a financial point of view, excessive leverage, but also technologically, some of those contracts have got hacked on other chains. And so then there is a more careful, like low technology risk approach to DeFi, which is more like Bitcoin collateralized loans, Bitcoin mortgages, things like that, which are much lower risk. And you see that with HODL HODL. They have a lending platform. They have a new one called Debify and Unchained Capital. So there are companies providing loans using Bitcoin, or you can lend into them yourself, as a user as well.
And as well, with Blockstream, you provide some Lightning solutions and you as well green light technology. So how do you see the current state of crypto trading?
Yeah, I mean, I think Lightning is going through some rapid adoption, and because of the fees again, and because there are more users. And Lightning has also sort of evolved into being a way to connect different layer twos. So people are using Lightning to move funds from an exchange into Liquid or into Fedimint or Cashew. So it's become a way to move money between different layer twos. And there's also now some more ways to combine Liquid and Lightning, which are getting adoption in wallets like Aqua and Bull Bitcoin Wallet, the Lipper Wallet, which is presenting at this exhibition as well. And so I think that provides new opportunities to reduce costs, to maintain Lightning channels more cheaply and effectively.
And with Liquid, you as well allow issuance of security tokens and tokenization of real-world assets as well currently, quite a big narrative. So what are your thoughts on the current state of the future of tokenization?
Yeah, so I think that while it's, many Bitcoiners just invest in Bitcoin, there are other groups of users who invest in company shares, right? So it's not necessarily, the overlap may not be that much, but the real world asset concept is a relatively rapidly growing area in a Bitcoin layer 2 space at the moment. And so, for example, there's a company called Stocker, which is kind of a share registration agent, and they do the securities work for these kind of securities to get licensing and to provide them in a way and enroll users. And for example, one they have issued most recently is basically MicroStrategy shares in a token. And so it's a Luxembourg securitization vehicle containing 100 shares of MicroStrategy, and you can trade it for against Bitcoin on SideSwap, which is a trustless market on liquids. So users have to enroll to trade MicroStrategy, but once they do, they can place these limit orders. They can trade MicroStrategy for Bitcoin 24/7, whereas the stock market is only open 9 to 5 in a week in New York, and they can also transfer small amounts of MicroStrategy. So they can transfer 1/100th of a MicroStrategy share peer-to-peer as if they were transacting Bitcoin.
And you mentioned now MicroStrategy. So, what are your thoughts on the Bitcoin buying position spree, like
Yeah,
buying for millions, billions of dollars?
yeah. So I'm quite. I think it's a very interesting strategy. They have some advantages that an individual doesn't. So if you as an individual wanted to replicate what they're doing, right, to buy some more Bitcoin, they take out loans or convertible notes. So as an individual, you get much higher interest and you're not able to issue a convertible note. So they have advantages like cost advantages and leverage advantages. So it's a way for you to share in that advantage for them to grow the Bitcoin that they hold over time by buying a share in the company. So I think it's an interesting approach for sure.
And how do you see the current crypto market, and how long do you think this bull market will last?
Well, I mean, it's hard to predict, but usually, like looking at past cycles, I think it's lasted about 18 months after the halving. And, of course, in this cycle, we saw a new all-time high shortly before the halving, which didn't really happen in previous markets. So it's almost like we had the start of a bull market, started early, like before the halving. So we'll see how it plays out. But yeah, I think it's, we're still in the early stages of the bull market, I would say.
And do you have any price target for Bitcoin for this bull market?
Well, I mean, it's hard to predict, of course, but I mean, I see that Arthur Hayes was predicting 1 million of Bitcoin by this end of this cycle. I mean, other people have said 500,000, so anything in that range, I think, is possible.
What will be the factors for such big growth of Bitcoin?
Yeah, I mean, I think that the thing to note is that when new money comes into Bitcoin, the market cap increases, but the new money doesn't have to be nearly as much as the market cap increase because price is set at the margin and there are not necessarily that many Bitcoins on the exchange. So as new users buy up those coins and cold store them, or the ETFs buy them and store them with a custodian, it will tend to push the price up in a way that 1 million in might increase the market cap by 50 million or 100 million. It really depends on the type of buyer. So if the buyer is buying Bitcoin and holding it for the long term, then it has a bigger effect. And so what people have observed is that of course, there are the Bitcoin holders who have learned over time to buy and cold store and not trade too much. Now, what we didn't know was how the ETF investors would behave. But the evidence so far is that they hold. So when the price fell a bit, not many ETFs were sold, actually.
And as well, last year you go on a buying spree for Bitcoin miners and about estimate ahead that it will be much more profitable. So what are your views on the current state of mining? How much is profitable now to mine?
It's not that profitable at the moment to mine because the hash rate has grown quite a lot. Of course, we've just gone through the halving, so the profitability will be reduced. So, but since the bear market, like January last year, the price has grown faster than the hash rate, more than 2 times faster. So the the profitability now, even after the halving, is already better than it was, a year ago, a year and a half ago, right? So I think, for mining to get more profitable, we just need the price to outpace the hash rate growth. Now, a lot of people bought miners in the bull market, and so those miners are gradually coming online. So that keeps mining profitability not so high until the excess miners are all used and put online.
And as well, we saw some more developments in the Bitcoin space, like ordinals and everything on the Bitcoin. So what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, I think the ordinals are just a way to arbitrarily place a rarity score on individual Satoshis. So they don't really take up any space unless people transact them, right? What I'm less keen on is the sort of the idea of putting a JPEG image in the blockchain, um, and that's the inscriptions part. And the reason is that they're quite big compared to the transactions. So, if they put a 100 kilobyte image in the blockchain, it tends to displace, 300 UTXOs or something like that, right? And so, of course, they're having fun doing it, and it's a permissionless system, so there's no way to limit that other than the fees, right? So they do tend to push the fees up, but it does sort of impact Bitcoin's scalability a bit because the extra UTXOs could be otherwise used by new users doing cold storage, and so there's a limit on how many UTXOs you can get, right? So it means effectively that there are less UTXOs available for users to do cold storage.
Now, this cycle, we really see a lot of hype around meme coins. Now as well, there are some meme coins on the coin blockchain, like yours. So what are your thoughts on meme coins?
Well, I mean, it's not exclusive to Bitcoin or the cryptocurrency space in a sense that there are sort of meme coins on the stock market almost now, right? I mean, the GameStop effect. So I think it's something similar. Like, it's not serious. People will play with it, and at least GameStop is a company with more money now because it sold some shares and kept the money. But you have investor rights and a share in a company. Whereas I think the meme coins are, it's just more of a game or something, right? There's no fundamental value there.
And well, in your opinion, what do we need for the mass adoption of Bitcoin?
So I think more usability, more time in the market, and education so people understand what it is. I think the ETFs help indirectly because for a lot of people, they were skeptical. And then if the financial institutions start offering Bitcoin in an ETF, they become more receptive to learning. So they may actually buy outside of the ETF in a straightforward way because they were made less skeptical by the regulators and the ETF financial institutions offering Bitcoin.
And can you share as well some plans for the development of blockchain?
So, I mean, we're just doing a lot of Bitcoin layer 2 things. So Lightning and Liquid and Greenlight and a hardware wallet, a Jade hardware wallet. We also make a miner. So we're doing the R&D stage for making our own Bitcoin miner. And then we also have Blockstream Finance, which brings financial instruments, so real world assets or financial instruments on Liquid. So we have a couple of those. One is the Blockstream mining notes, which is a tokenized 3-year hash rate contract, which is coming to maturity next month. So it's been running for almost 3 years now. And so at maturity, that pays out the Bitcoin mines to the people who hold it at the end, and they could trade it in between. We have another one which is called the basic note, which is buying excess miners that are not put online new and storing them until the price goes up and then selling them back to the market. So it's a kind of Bitcoin basis strategy to see if we can sell them again on behalf of the investors for a higher price in Bitcoin as a Bitcoin mining profitability improves.
And as well as for your own Bitcoin portfolio, do you just hold your Bitcoin forever, or do you have as well part of your portfolio in like trading strategy and like fixed periods and so forth?
Yeah, so mostly I try to cold store holds. I do some. I did buy some MicroStrategy, so against Bitcoin, so you can sort of price MicroStrategy in Bitcoin and then try to swing trade it a bit. And then another thing I do is the kind of interest rate arbitrage where you borrow against Bitcoin maybe at 5%, and then you lend it on the lending platforms like HODL Lend or Bitfinex Margin Trading at maybe 15%. So you make a bit of interest. You have to be careful because if the Bitcoin price changes rapidly, you might have to repay your loan. So you have to be careful to not mismatch the duration of the loans.
And do you have any strategy for fixing profits during those bull markets?
No, I generally hate selling Bitcoin, so I'm usually very all in. So selling has not been part of my plan ever.
And so why Bitcoin is the best asset for you?
I mean, I think it's the only investable asset in the crypto space, and I think it has a lot of potential for further adoption. And the other interesting question you could ask is if Bitcoin has reached saturation, meaning everybody who wants to get involved has got involved in some years, would you still want to hold it? And I think the answer is yes, because it's still scarce. And so it should be an inflation hedge. So at the moment, it's both an inflation hedge and a rapid adoption story where, as more users come in, it has to be divided more thinly, so the price tends to go up. But eventually, it'll be fully allocated. And then the question is, what does it do then? But I think then it does something like gold, which is it's still an inflation hedge.
Thank you for such interesting conversation.
Thank you.